What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for Game Week 34, the final week I have to play through before I wildcard in Game Week 35. So I'll talk through my transfers, thoughts on Haaland from last night's game as well, all that good stuff, and I'll show you how I did in Game Week 33. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Still trying to hit 400k before the end of the season. It's possible if you hit that button, if you've been enjoying the content all season. Otherwise, let's jump into it. All right, let's start with Game Week 33, which for me was a little bit rubbish. It's the worst red arrow I've had for a little while, so I fell from about 24k to 38k, so just inside the top 40,000, and it was my worst game week rank since, I think, Game Week 15 or something like that. So not a great week, despite the fact that I scored 62 points, mostly because 26 of those points came from Palmer, who's super high owned. His points basically just don't matter at this stage. And then Haaland, who was also really highly captained, who got 20 points. So 46 of my 62 came from Palmer and Haaland. And only Solanke actually got a return from the rest of my players. Darwin, Salah, Saka, all 2 points. Son, Bradley, Saliba, 1. And Neto and Gabriel was 0. It was just rubbish. It was just a really bad week. Like having triple Arsenal against Aston Villa and triple Liverpool against Palace, and nobody comes away with a return. Like, what is it? It's 5, 6, 7, 8 points between my 6 Liverpool and Arsenal players. It's just a game week to kind of write off. And the funny thing is, I planned my moves for kind of game weeks 30 to 34 a while back, right? Like back when I was free hitting in game week 29, I pretty much knew what my moves would be for the next few weeks. And when Son did really well against Luton, and I knew he was going to be playing up front and Richarlison was injured, I really wanted to keep him because my initial moves were to do Son to Eze in game week 33 and upgrade Bradley to Van Dijk. Now, the chances are I would have benched Eze anyway and played Sarabia, so I wouldn't have actually been that much better off. But changing that plan to make sure I could keep Son the whole way through has not gone well because his points have been really disappointing. Just 1 assist in the last 3 games. Yes, he came close to scoring in the match against Nottingham Forest, but overall, just really disappointing. And he's not playing great in that number 9 role. The transfer that I did make was Areola, who didn't play again, to Dean Henderson. That was a move with double game week 34 in mind because although I already had Neto from Bournemouth with a double, it's 2 away games, whereas for Crystal Palace, it's 2 home games. So that was really just a luxury transfer. But he went and got 9 points on my bench when Neto got 0. Like goalkeepers, I don't know if anyone else feels like this. They've just been terrible for me all season. I think if I go back and count, I've probably had like 3 clean sheets in my first 11 all season. The one from Pickford right before I wildcarded him out, and then obviously he went on a run, so I missed most of his points. And then a couple from Areola, and that's about it. And look, don't get me wrong, I was never playing Henderson away to Liverpool instead of Neto home to Man United. I think that was the right decision, but it's still painful to see those 9 points on the bench. So really disappointing week. Obviously, I've been planning up until game week 34 because my strategy is to dead end, as I'll talk about in a second. And we're going to be wildcarding soon. So I'm hoping the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season are good and I can push on for a decent ramp. But it is a bit frustrating to fall down to 38k. But at the end of the day, it's not a terrible rank, right? It's definitely respectable. It's just about whether or not I can hold that position and kind of push on now. So, yeah, terrible week, really. But we move on and we go on to game week 34. So as I've just said, and a quick reminder for anyone that skipped to this part of the video, I am wildcarding in game week 35. So for this week, I'm only thinking about game week 34. It doesn't matter what fixtures a player has in the future because I can change them around as I want to on wildcard. The only thing I'm conscious of is not selling too many players that I've got lots of value tied up in that I know I'm going to want back on wildcard, because although selling Salah will mean there's a lot more money to go around, from the drafts I've put together, especially if Trippier is fit, money does get tight again. So I don't want to sell too many players that I got very cheap, like Cole Palmer, for example. I've got 2 free transfers this week and 0.8 million in the bank. Now, last week, my transfer was to bring in Dean Henderson, so I'm definitely going to play him this week. 2 home games against West Ham and Newcastle. It would be typical FPL for Neto to go and smash it now, who's on my bench. But I think if you were free hitting and you had to pick between those 2 goalkeepers, you would definitely go for Dean Henderson. Just quickly on my bench, I've got Neto and Zabani against Villa away and Wolves away, so double Bournemouth defence. Palmer against Arsenal away, who I don't really want to bench given how good he's been, despite the fact it's not a easy fixture. And then Doughty against Brentford at home. I have spoken about possibly bench boosting in 34, but the whole time I've, spoken about that, I have said I'm probably still going to do it in game week 37 instead. And I think that's what I'm going to do. The main reason is I've put a wildcard 35 draft together, just briefly, right? A rough idea of what it would look like. And I do think the bench is better in 37. There is some argument to go now because I know all those players are fit and they should play, and just take the points now because in game week 37 something could go horribly wrong. But the gap between locking in the wildcard for 35 and bench boosting in 37 is not that big. Something would have to go horribly wrong for that bench boost to be terrible. And the likelihood is I will roll in game week 36 and have 2 free transfers for 37 anyway. So I think I'm going to bench boost in 37. The other thing is, and this is only a minor thing, I wouldn't let this put you off bench boosting if that's what you want to do. But for Palmer, for example, he will play against Man City in the FA Cup on the weekend before he plays that Arsenal game in the Premier League. So if he was to go and get injured or something like that, I would lose a player on my bench. And I just don't think it's worth taking that risk. I do think I'm very close, but I'm probably going to go in 37 like was the original plan. Had Connor Bradley stayed fit, maybe I would change my mind on that because I'd have an extra transfer to play with. But that's not the case. And obviously Trent is back anyway. So that's the bench boost. I'm probably not going to do it. In my defence, I've got Gabriel and Saliba double up. Wolves away, Chelsea at home. Obviously, Arsenal's season doesn't look quite as good right now. Drop points against Villa. Man City obviously now ahead by 2. And they're out of the Champions League. But at least that lets them concentrate on the league only because that's the only competition they've got left. No need to be rotating players and stuff like that unless you absolutely have to. Obviously, the medical team will know about fatigue and stuff like that. So no issues with Gabriel and Saliba. And I still think that's a very good defence. My thoughts haven't changed on them massively just because they lost to Bayern Munich last night and conceded 2 to Villa. They will still stop opposition from creating too many chances. And I think Wolves away and Chelsea at home is not the worst set of fixtures. Like, Wolves will cause them some problems, but they've obviously got players coming back from injury like Hwang. How many minutes will he play? You've just got to hope that Arsenal can do what they did against Brighton away and just control that match. I don't think Chelsea is the worst fixture. And plus, with my strategy, there's just no need to be moving players like that around. And they have been great for me this season. They've got set piece threat as well. So I'm just not really worried. I do have Connor Bradley in my back 3. That's mostly to kind of show you that that is the player I'm going to replace this week. I could just play Zabani and focus my transfers elsewhere, but I think it makes sense to make a defensive transfer. So I'm going to free up money with one of my midfield players, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I'm going to upgrade Bradley probably to a different Liverpool defender. Like, it's 2 away games against Fulham and Everton. I'm not necessarily expecting a clean sheet, but I don't think there's a better defender to bring in. Which Liverpool defender I go for will depend on the minutes in tonight's game against Atalanta. Basically, when I sell Son, I can afford any Liverpool defender up to and including Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, I'd like to go for Trent. I think he is the most exciting. He's the most attacking in that team. But he is only just back from injury. And even with Bradley out, which will increase Trent's minutes, Gomez could still play there. Like, we don't know how fit Trent is. The game before, the first leg against Atalanta, Klopp said there was no chance he was ever going to play in that match. And then he gets like nearly 45 in the game against Palace, but that's forced because of Bradley's injury. I'm just not quite sure. I'm not sure what I need to see tonight. I think if Trent came off the bench and got like 30 minutes and it was a clearly rotated team from Klopp, maybe I would go for him in the double. I just don't want to bring in a player that costs that. It's not even about the money, really. I just don't want to bring in a player for the final week before I wildcard that's only going to play once. Like, Trent is good, but he's not bring him in for one game only in a double good, I would say. Another option is, the obvious player to go for is Van Dijk. And right now, that's probably who I will go for because I know he's going to play twice. But I am slightly interested in Robertson because he's been back from injury a little while now. And if he gets benched tonight, he's definitely starting against Fulham. And I think there would be a chance then he would play against Everton as well. Not a guarantee. It could be Trent, right back, Gomez, left back. And obviously Tsimikas is around as well. But Tsimikas hasn't been used that much in the league by Klopp since he came back from his injury. I'm just not sure there's as much trust there, maybe. I don't know. But I think one of Robertson or Trent will play both games in the double. I think Gomez will cover for one of them in one of the matches. That would be my guess right now. And obviously that might change based on what happens tonight. Like, they could, you know, Robertson and Trent could both start and go and play 120 minutes tonight. You just don't know. But I think that's what will happen. And if I had to guess, I think Robertson is more likely to be the player that plays twice. So as a differential over Van Dijk, I am kind of tempted. But I also just don't know if Robertson is that much better than Van Dijk. Yes, he's got more chance of getting you a return from open play, but Van Dijk is a threat from set pieces, and you know he's going to play twice. So I don't know if it's just overthinking looking at Trent or Robertson, or whether it's worth going for that attacking differential. But I think right now I'm probably going to do Bradley to Van Dijk, and that will be funded by a midfielder move. So midfield is fairly straightforward for me. I've got Son, who doesn't have a fixture in game week 34. Sarabia with the double of Arsenal at home and Bournemouth at home. Salah, who's currently got the captain's armband, Fulham away and Everton away. And then Saka with Wolves away and Chelsea at home. And like I said earlier, Cole Palmer is on the bench. Now with Son, again, he's in the 11 to show you that that is the player that's going to be replaced. And I do have money tied up in him. If I have a quick look here, I bought him for 9.6. He's gone up to 9.9. So I can sell him for 9.7, but he is going to drop in price again before I have to buy him back on wildcard. So I'm only losing 0.1. It's not a big deal, and I'm going to buy Eze. I don't think there's any real doubts over that. I don't think there's a better midfielder that I can buy. I'm already going to be tripled up on Liverpool by doing Bradley to Van Dijk or Robertson or Trent, probably Van Dijk. I could do Bradley to Munoz or someone like that for Crystal Palace and go double up and get Diaz in, but I'm just not 100% confident in Diaz's minutes. He might play twice, but there's not that guarantee. Whereas with Eze, there is. And Elise I like as a pump, but he's only just back from injury. So Eze is more likely to get the minutes, I would say. And we think he's on penalties as well. So Son to Eze is almost certainly going to be the move. I don't want to go for Hwang. I don't want to go for Brereton Diaz from Sheffield United. I can't get another Arsenal or Liverpool player. And I don't want someone like McNeil. So Eze is just so obvious, and that's been the plan for weeks now, and I just don't see any reason to kind of change that, and that's what's going to give me the money to make that defensive move. So it's quite boring. Lots of people are going to bring in Eze, lots of people are going to have him on the free hit, but it just makes sense for my side, and I just don't think there's any need to fight it. On Sarabia, I do have some concerns about whether he'll start both games, but obviously, you know, he's been in my team for a while now. I don't have the transfers to deal with him without taking a hit, and I just don't think that's worth it. My hope would be that because Hwang's only just back from injury and he came off the bench last game, that maybe he can only play one of these two. And obviously, Aït-Nouri is a doubt as it stands as well. If Hwang and Aït-Nouri were fully fit, then Sarabia might become an issue because obviously Aït-Nouri is playing in quite an attacking role. But I just don't think I need to overthink this one. My hope would be that he starts twice. At the very least, I'm going to get one start and an appearance off the bench. And that is probably enough for me. Plus, he's really cheap as well. So by the time I get Eze and buy the Liverpool defender, I wouldn't have a huge amount of money to upgrade him. Is it worth a hit to go from Sarabia to Elise? Maybe, but I don't think I want to kind of chance it. And obviously, Saka, great, will always start for Arsenal when he's fit. And look, Salah hasn't been fantastic recently. In fact, if I'm just going to double check here, since he returned against Brighton, which is when he started, he did play against Man City in game week 28, but he started against Brighton. He's had 2 goals, one against Brighton, one against Man United. Obviously, the Man United one was a penalty. He hasn't performed that well, but it's still 2 goals in 4 games. Which is not enough for his price, but it's still somewhat consistent considering how bad he's played in most people's eyes. And I just think he's got every chance of starting both those games. And like some people are going to say, you know, should we captain Salah? Should we triple captain? My question will be, who are you going to go for instead? I know Eze and Crystal Palace look good in attack against Liverpool, but I don't think I'm quite at the stage where I want to captain him over someone like Salah. I don't know. It feels like too much recency bias there. Like after Brighton, people who captained Salah were saying we were robbed. You know, should have had way more returns. There's been 3 games since then where he's not played great. Is that enough to just rule him out as an option for captaincy? I don't think so. I think he's the obvious player to go for, and Fulham and Everton will give up chances as well. So I'm pretty happy with that. I don't see me changing captaincy. If I did, it would go to Saka, and I just don't think Saka is a better option than Salah. So simple as that. So pretty happy with the midfield. Son almost certainly going to Eze. It's just about which defender I bring in for Bradley. And then up front, I've got Haaland with a single game week against Brighton away, and Darwin Núñez and Dominic Solanke with double game weeks. And it's pretty simple. All three of those players are going to be staying for me for game week 34. And then when I wildcard next week, I'll keep hold of Haaland, and then I'll sell Darwin and Solanke, probably for Isak and Nicholas Jackson. But that's a conversation for next week. I could play Zabani instead of Bradley and go with 2 Liverpool players for the double. Because if I'm not bench boosting, it doesn't matter if Bradley's on the bench with a red flag. I mean, obviously when Liverpool have a double game, you usually want to triple up, but it wouldn't be the end of the world to only go with 2. And then I could use my 2 free transfers on Son and Haaland and have 11 double game weekers. But I just don't think the combination of Zabani, Eze, and Mateta is as good as Van Dijk, Eze, and Haaland. Because Brighton is the kind of game where Haaland could go and get a decent score. And as much as look, I look at Liverpool's fixtures, Fulham away and Everton away. I'm not necessarily expecting a clean sheet, but I do think there's more chance than there is with Bournemouth. Plus, Van Dijk is a much better goal threat than Zabani is from set pieces. Or, of course, I go for Robertson and Trent, who are both more attacking as well. So I don't think it makes too much sense to sell Haaland. I also have a little bit of value tied up in him. Not that much, but I know I'm definitely going to want him in game week 35. So I'm going to keep hold of him and just sell Son and Bradley instead. I might go for the 11 double game weeks in the end, but I don't think so. Just quickly on Haaland, he was seen limping when he went off last night, and he went off at full time before extra time, which I don't think would have happened if he was fully fit. You'd think that they would keep Haaland on, right, to go and try and get that goal to not have to go to penalties. But Pep did say that he asked to come off. So maybe there is a slight issue there. I don't think we need to panic. If I was a free hitter, I would have gone for 11 double game weekers anyway. This just makes it even better. I think Haaland will probably be fine. We will hear from Pep before the weekend, but just keep in mind that City will play against Chelsea in the FA Cup before they play that Brighton game next Thursday. But the good thing about that is, I think City will use it as a chance to rotate some players anyway. Like, I don't see De Bruyne playing in the FA Cup, for example, and I think Haaland would have probably been on the bench as well, because I think they can go and beat Chelsea without those 2 players. And obviously the game isn't for another week, so it gives Haaland every chance to be fit for that. And the league title is obviously, as we know, still on. And by the time City play Brighton, they could be 4 points behind Liverpool and Arsenal if they win their next 2 games. So even though I think City will go on and win the league, it's still open and it's still very interesting. So I think Haaland will be fine, but let's see what Pep says in the press conference tomorrow. But either way, I'm probably keeping him. And then look, Solanke and Darwin. Solanke, I've said all week, is a very boring pick, but I've held him since game week 28. There's no reason to get rid of him now. In the last game, he did look uncomfortable at times, but he still goes. I think he played the whole game, didn't he? Let me just double check. He still went and played 90 minutes against Man United. Maybe they're still managing that issue that he had weeks ago. It hasn't stopped him starting games. It's not stopping him finishing them either. I just don't think unless Ariola, probably pronounced that wrong now. Unless he comes out and says there's an issue with Solanke, he's got to stay right. Again, I'm just on this strategy now, and this week is quite boring because I've got double game weeks. There's just no need to do anything with them. And it's similar with Darwin Núñez. Like, he is not a guarantee to start both games or to get 90 minutes in either of them. But it's just not worth using a transfer on him. There's other issues that I've got in this team. So that is me pretty much set. Son to Eze, I'm like 99.99% sure I will do. It's just which defender for Bradley. It's probably going to be Van Dijk. I'm going to have 10 double game weekers and Haaland as my only single game weeker. I think that's pretty good considering that I haven't used my second wild card yet. And obviously then I will use that in 35 to plan for the last 4 weeks plus my bench boost. And then we'll be done. Hopefully it's a green arrow this week. But the way the last few weeks have gone, it's been a bit up and down. I'm down to 38k now. I don't know. I'd like a green arrow, but let's see what happens. Every time I say that, it's a red arrow. But I think the team overall looks good. Free hitters are, of course, going to have an advantage this week. But I don't think it's a massive one. I'm hoping that my team can stand up pretty well. I think it's been planned for well. Free hit 29 has gone fine overall. Obviously not in game week 29. Things look good. If you've enjoyed that, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow for final thoughts. And then we'll do the deadline stream on Saturday. Slightly later deadline this week. It's 1:30 UK time. So I'll probably start around 12. So I'll catch you then.